This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Evan Jensen. This show is live. It's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now, but the whole show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel. Now, it's a special long weekend for school children here in South Africa as the country prepares for its Youth Day celebrations tomorrow. Who should legitimately claim ownership of the legacy of the 1976 student uprising? It's a debate that continues here this morning. Later, we look at sterilization during HIV treatment and Nigeria's bold step to ban the practice of female genital mutilation. Then we close the show with a look at Streetlight Schools, a lovely initiative. First, though, today's news with Anindoma.
Good morning, I'm Anindoma. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. While there are conflicting reports this morning over Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir's exact whereabouts, judgment is expected in an urgent application for his arrest. The High Court in Pretoria is expected to hand down judgment in the case this morning. The Southern African Litigation Centre has applied to the court to force government to issue an urgent warrant. Al-Bashir, who is in the country for the African Union Summit, is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity allegedly committed during the conflict in Darfur. Meanwhile, the ANC says government has done nothing wrong regarding the Sudanese president's visit. The ruling party says the necessary processes were observed and implemented prior to his arrival.
I think they are using it for political gains, and they are not explaining to people that the immunity was applied and no one objected to it, and then therefore the President al-Bashir is in the country under that immunity, not undermining any law of our country or any law of any of the world. So we therefore say let's not play politics on it and allow the court to process the matter and see what happens thereafter.
The United States government has expressed its deep concern by President Omar al-Bashir's travel to South Africa. In a statement released late yesterday, the State Department called on government to support international efforts to provide justice for the victims of Darfur. The U.S. statement reiterates the ICC indictment against the Sudanese head of state on charges of crimes against humanity and genocide. The State Department indicates that the warrants for President Bashir's arrest remain outstanding. This despite the ICC prosecutor suspending investigations into war crimes in Darfur late last year. As the African Union Heads of State Summit draws to a close today, topics of women empowerment, the war on terror, xenophobia, migration and finding alternative sources to fund the AU have dominated discussions. Speaking at the summit, AU chairperson and Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe also slammed Burundi's President Pierre Nkurunziza's bid for a third term. Mugabe did not mention Nkurunziza by name but lashed out at presidents who find excuses to stay on in power beyond a constitutionally mandated 2 terms. And South Korea's health ministry has reported 5 new cases of Middle East respiratory syndrome. This takes the total to 150 cases in the outbreak. That is the largest outside Saudi Arabia. The ministry also said a patient infected with MERS has died. This was the 16th fatality in the outbreak that began in May. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, over to you.
Thanks, Celine. Now, with Youth Day being tomorrow, the debate on who should legitimately claim ownership of the legacy of the 1976 student uprising still rages on here in South Africa. Should that honour go to the Black Consciousness Movement, the African National Congress, or the Pan-Africanist Congress? What role did any of these movements play in the 1976 student uprising? What about the centrality of the Soweto Student Representative Council and its evolution into the South African Youth Revolutionary Council? All these questions recently came under the spotlight at a seminar organised by UNISA's Department of History in collaboration with the Wuppertal Brigadier BAM Chair on Electoral Democracy in Africa. Now, joining us From Pretoria today is Dr. Tula Simpson. A very good morning to you, Doctor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Hello. Hello. Good morning.
And
Pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And then, in Johannesburg, we are joined by Professor Itumeleng Mosala, both part of a very lively debate until now. Very good morning to you, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners.
Prof, let me start with you here in the studio with me in Johannesburg. More than 20 years now after democracy, why is the question around who should claim ownership of the 76 student uprising legacy, why is it important today?
Well, I think it is important because we need to just remember who it is that was the agency of struggle and liberation in the country in the years that led to the final collapse of apartheid and settler colonialism in our country. I think we tend to locate that answer in specific individual organizations, in my view, wrongly. Mm-hmm. It is the people of this country. The people of this country were the ones who bore the brunt of suffering and struggle throughout, going way back to colonialism, but particularly in the years of struggle. It is black people of South Africa who did that, and in particular in this case, it is the young people who finally got to a point where they were fearless in dealing with the system. And so the political organizations that were involved on behalf of the people and with the people. But it is not correct to try and get them to compete about. What I know, because I was there at the time, is that the black consciousness movement was the primary motive force in the country. But even the black consciousness movement has no individual claim to that. It is the people of our country who brought about justice and peace in the country.
Dr. Simpson in Pretoria, interesting remarks here from Professor Mosala. How do you view that, and what is your point of view?
I would tend to agree with the perspective that he's articulated there. No less than the ANC President Oliver Tambo himself, reflecting on the Soweto uprising in 1985 at the Karabo Conference in May, he said that the ANC's political and military structures at the time were in a stage where they were not in a position to actually lead the uprising or even to exploit it in the immediate aftermath. This was a process which was led by the situation on the ground that the students felt that they were facing with regards to the education question in a very combustible environment that Soweto was in the early months of 1976, with a whole lot of other social and economic problems encountering the population. And with regards to the legacy of the Soweto uprising, I think we need to remember that there are many legacies. Any great historical event, not just Soweto 76, but the Russian Revolution or the French Revolution, there's no one single legacy for people to claim as being their inheritance. There are multiple legacies which have a variety of different impacts, which different organizations can legitimately claim that they're the inheritors of. So I think that a pluralistic interpretation of June 1976 and of the legacies therefrom and of the organizations who've claimed aspects of that legacy, I think that that might be the way that we should look at this and any other great historical event, multiple legacies with various different owners.
And in a way, everyone contributed to the eventual victory, if there is such a thing, Professor. And maybe we should see it within that context. But this recent debate, what did you make of it, and what do you make of the outcomes from this debate?
Well, I think there's always an attempt by some people to distort history. And unfortunately, when we distort history, we distort history by excluding the real bearers of the struggle. And my point here this morning is that it is the black people of South Africa who are the legitimate owners of the struggle. The legacy belongs to the black people of South Africa. Now, the issue of which organization was involved is very clear. The facts are very clear. It is the Black Consciousness Movement of South Africa. It is Steve Biko, it's Mapetla Mohapi, Sonkgopo Tsetiro. We were the people who were pushing the struggle at that time. But my point is, it is not even us. Even we can't claim to be the owners of this legacy. It is the people of South Africa who are the owners of this legacy. And it is wrong. Our organizations tend to distort.
Yeah.
And I think this is what is happening at the moment. There is an attempt to distort history.
Do you agree with this distortion, Dr. Simpson?
I think that the official ANC perspective, the reason why I quoted President Tambo and his reflection on this is that it was a verdict which the ANC at that time, I don't know whether, June 1976 has been remembered on an annual basis many times since then. Maybe leaders in the present day are saying different things, but the ANC was always very frank in acknowledging that this was a people's uprising. And if we look, when we speak about legacy, we're speaking about the aftermath of Soweto 1976. And I don't think there's any way of denying that a lot of the anger of the people who were involved in the uprising, it helped to reinforce the ANC's armed struggle, because people came to the conclusion that the solution that the ANC was offering, that the only way of confronting the system was to fight back with sophisticated weaponry. A lot of people left the country to join the ANC. A lot of people were inspired by the ANC's armed struggle. So when we speak about the legacy, I'm not saying that it only fed into the ANC, but a very important stream fed into the ANC-led liberation struggle in future years. And that reached its culmination. I mean, when you speak about the ANC winning the overwhelming majority of support of the black population in the '94 elections, that has to come from somewhere. And one of them is, even though they didn't organize the Soweto uprising, when we're speaking about the legacy of the Soweto uprising, the ANC is one of the major beneficiaries, and so they can't be written out of that history.
No, absolutely.
Tomorrow, let's escalate the discussion, because I think we agree on the on the principle of the argument. But let's move on to the class of 2015. I want to talk to you, Professor, about activism today. Have we lost the legacy of activism amongst our youth? Are we more obsessed in the materialist kind of way? Are our young people more at risk because we are not active, because we are not as conscious as we should be?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think what has happened is that 1994 was actually bad for black people. What we did in 1994 is that we depoliticized our people. We created a culture of materialism that you're talking about, a culture of entitlement. We forgot that freedom is a political matter. Freedom is not a material matter. Freedom is a political matter. It's a cultural matter. And what has happened since then is that we have a state that purports to do things for people. And this is where we lost it. I think part of the problem with let me put it negatively, the non-black consciousness approach to things is that we tend to promise things to people. We fought a struggle in the black consciousness movement in the late 60s and 70s in which we said black people must stand up and do things for themselves. The greatest slogan that ever came out of that time was, "Black man, you are on your own." Now, what is happening now is that that activism has been killed. It's been killed by the kind of settlement and freedom that was given to people. You don't give freedom to people. People attain freedom. And that's where we are. We are at a point in which we are independent, we're not free.
Dr. Simpson, you've heard the premise of the merits of this discussion. I want to take it a little bit further around activism and maybe get your insight into the kind of campaigns we see these days. We've seen some at tertiary institutions. I'm not 100% convinced that they belong to the students of those institutions, but that's my personal opinion. How do you view this and where we are today?
Activism, we can have a debate about, but interest, I think that the young generation is very interested in the questions that were raised inter alia by the generation of 1976, but not necessarily limited to that. I mean, one of the questions which the 76 generation were asking is, why do we have one curriculum in the townships and we have a different curriculum when we go to the suburbs? Why do we have an industrial education for the black poor children and we have a liberal arts education with a full diverse curriculum across the street if we go to the white suburb? And that debate is very much alive in the present day. I'm not going to divulge the content, obviously, of discussions which take place within tertiary institutions, but the question of who teaches, what the subject matter is, and what should be the criteria for success within the system, that is a subject, even if students are not in the streets protesting about it, it's something which they're extremely interested by. And if you want to enliven any tertiary institution, the students there, to the issues which are live there, speak about those subjects. And those are the subjects which have actually been raised by the students at many universities. And I think that that is part of the legacy of Soweto in 1976. And when I speak about great events having legacies lasting into the long term, we need to remember that these, it can still be lost.
Yes, it can still be lost. I wanted to conclude today's discussion around young people and the legacy of the student uprising by giving you a number. Within the next 35 years, Africa's population will more than double, and more than half of that population will be under 18 years old. In your closing remarks, can you touch on what that means for the continent in light of a day like Youth Day, in light of the struggles that we face on the continent? I'll start with you, Prof.
Well, I think the situation is very dire on the continent. It's dire in our country as it is at the moment. That statistic is a very worrying statistic. I think that we all forget. I mean, I tend to myself think that I'm still the young person that I was in 1976. But we all forget that this country should actually be in the hands of our young people. But what is it that we're doing for them? We're doing nothing for our young people. This government is doing very little for young people. This government is not thinking about what is it? This government has betrayed the revolution that young people represented in 1976 in Soweto and other townships.
Thank you, Prof. Can you respond to that? I'm sure that the government would argue that, days like tomorrow, the future is much brighter for young people, the investment in education, health, and so forth. How do you view that?
I'm optimistic about the youth. As you can tell from my accent, for a large part of my youth, I was actually brought up in Britain, and I think that a lot of the young people that we've got in this country are capable of doing very great things. They're certainly doing great things within the university framework. The future is open for them. And Africa, it's the fastest growing continent in the world in terms of economic growth, and they're coming into a rich legacy, and if they can draw on the lessons of the past, I believe that Africa can potentially have a very great future. It's in the hands of the youth, and I think that there's no reason to be pessimistic about what they will make, about the opportunities which are there for them.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning. That's Dr. Tula Simpson joining us from Pretoria. We're talking about the legacy of 1976. Who owns it? It's not really important who owns it. We all own it. It belongs to all of us here in South Africa. Some of us were even involved throughout the 80s and so forth. So it belongs to all South Africans who want to be part of it. Isn't it so?
I agree 100%. I agree 100%.
Thank you very much. That is Professor Itumeleng Musala joined us here in studio to talk about that. Youth Day in South Africa commemorates the Soweto uprising in the country tomorrow. The day is celebrated on June 16 every year. For those of you that don't know, the day is also celebrated in order to recognize the role of youth in the liberation of South Africa from the apartheid regime. Now let's take a look at what your views are on this matter. Many passionate, different views. Miss Joy says, hello Monday, lots to do before Youth Day, public holiday tomorrow. Let's go, go, go. Yes, it's not just about the public holiday, Miss Joy. The Prince says, the way I'm craving June 16, God bless Youth Day. Only 21 hours to go. Yes, a time to reflect on where we come from. Dylan Peary says, we're no longer hustling, we're building businesses. Youth Day, Youth of Today, African Youth Decade, that hits the nail on the head. Yes, we're no longer hustling just to get basic rights. We're now building businesses, building futures for our children. Most importantly, don't give up easily. Youth Month, Youth Day, June 16. I thank you very much, Lucky. That hits the hammer, the nail right on the head, and there's a beautiful picture. That's a beautiful picture of the time that was 1976. It was a day that will forever live in the annals of South African history. Now, today's pick comes from Quartz, captioned tigers, hippos and hyenas have escaped from Tbilisi Zoo and are running around the city. Yes, isn't that really cool? having a hippo walk around a main street in Europe. That's very nice. Some would say Tbilisi is not in Europe. Others say that it is. Anyhow, Mediterranean counts. Let's take a look at the front pages from around the world. Let's have a look at where we start today's Europe. Yeah, we start with the Times reports that the family of a teenager believed to be Britain's youngest suicide bomber accused Islamic State leaders of cowardice yesterday for luring him into carrying out their dirty work. We move to the United Kingdom. The Independent reports poll, its finding has revealed almost half of British people think refugees, yes, migrants, including those who have escaped the civil war in Syria, should be turned away from the United Kingdom. Yes, migration is a problem not just in South Africa, I tell you. In China, the South Morning China Post, South Korea's health authority said today that 5 more people have been confirmed positive for the Middle East respiratory syndrome, MERS. The virus is raising the total number of infected now to 150, while another fatality linked to the viral disease has increased the death toll now to 16. Well, let's take a look now what's happening around the country today. We start here in Johannesburg, where 3 men are expected to appear it's not in the Kuruman's Magistrates Court in connection. It's not Johannesburg, with the murder of a Northern Cape farmer. That's in Kimberley. Then in Bloemfontein, a Free State couple who allegedly forced their 11-year-old daughter to have sex with men are expected to receive their trial date in the Magistrates Court there today. In Kimberley, the 4 boys accused of raping and assaulting a matric learner at the Jan Kempdorp Agricultural School, well, they're back in court. The case has been postponed a few times already due to an incomplete police investigation. Go figure. The 4 boys are accused of sexually abusing another boy with a broomstick. Severe flooding, as you saw from that pic of the day, severe flooding in the Georgian capital, Tbilisi, has left at least 12 people dead on Sunday and triggered a big game hunt across the city for lions, tigers, a bear, a hippopotamus and other dangerous animals that escaped from the city's ravaged zoo. The carcasses of a lion, a boar and tiger were seen, and zoo authorities said 6 wolves were also dead. Residents were warned to stay indoors as police conducted the hunt, but fear deepened as night fell on the city of 1.1 million inhabitants, with some of the animals still on the loose and in the traffic, it seems. This is Newsroom. We'll be back with you after a short little break.
Better route. Incoming. Watch out. Let's brighten up a little. I can handle this. Engineered intuition. The new Audi A6.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, according to the South African National AIDS Council's Stigma Index, almost 500 women who are living with HIV are sterilized without their consent across the country. This is said to be the largest number of reported cases in South Africa. The survey results show that the highest percentage of forced sterilisation took place in Eden, in the Western Cape, and Buffalo City in the Eastern Cape, with 22% the number there. Sedibeng in Gauteng also came in the survey with 19%. Now, joining us in Pretoria today is Professor Kangalani Zuma, who is the director at the Human Sciences Research Council. Very good morning to you, Prof. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
The numbers are a little bit disturbing. Just tell us how and where the survey was conducted, and if you can maybe give us your views on it.
The study was conducted among people living with HIV and conducted by people living with HIV, that is the networks of people living with HIV, including TAG, NAPA, and Positive Women's Network. And the study was conducted in 18 districts among these women, and over 10,000 women responded to this particular survey. And I just think I need to contextualize this, that this was a stigma survey, an HIV-related stigma survey. So in a number of questions that were asked related to stigma, one of the questions was, were you ever coerced by a health professional to actually have be sterilized because of HIV, since you were diagnosed with HIV? So this was one of the many questions that were asked. And of course, almost 500 women responded that they were ever, they responded yes, they were ever coerced to this practice by a health professional.
Now, we're talking about mostly very poor and illiterate people in this instance. You talk about this coercion to sterilization. Was it a case of them signing forms, not being able to understand the content or context of it?
I think because the studies asked a number of questions, and this was one question that was asked. It raised the issues that such a practice is going on out there in our health facilities, and further investigations are actually required to understand how these are done and by whom and why these are done, because this question raised more questions that need to be answered. So it actually requires further research to investigate exactly what are the circumstances that actually such a practice took place.
How accurate is this study, considering that it was a stigma survey and not meant to measure forced sterilization of HIV-positive women?
I think I believe in the results, that the responses that people who participated in the study provided, because in such a study, even though it's a self-reported survey, there is no incentive of saying something that is not correct in this particular survey. So I would believe 100% the responses that participants provided in the study. So it is an issue that is going on. It is a practice that should not be taking place. It is something that needs serious further investigations.
What do you think are the potential implications of this survey? How can it assist to curb the problem? And what are the next steps that you would like to be seen put into place to deal with this problem?
I think what we need to do as a society is to stand up against people who discriminate others because of their HIV status, either from what we say to them, from what we do, and making them somehow feel unacceptable in the society. We need to deal aggressively with that. And I am happy that, SANAC has put, processes to get campaigns out there to educate people about the negative consequences of stigmatizing people. And of course, it is a wrong thing to do for anyone in the society to discriminate against anyone for whatever reason. So what we would recommend is that we need to have campaigns. We need to educate our society that it is wrong to stigmatize people against HIV or against any other ailment or for that matter.
Now, your have you had any response from the Department of Health to this survey?
The responses that we've had was that, of course, the issue that health workers coerce, people to be sterilized is not part of the policy of the Department of Health. That is our understanding, and that is what we've had. But I'm sure Department of Health will provide a full response if they have not yet to actually the practice that is going on in the field.
Professor Kangalani Zuma, I thank you for joining us today. We're talking about sterilization, HIV-positive women being coerced. What are your views at SABC Newsroom? Of course, it's a survey that's been done recently. The outcome is a little bit alarming. Now, the Pretoria High Court says Omar al-Bashir must stay until it rules today on whether he should be handed over to the International Criminal Court. The Sudanese president is wanted by the UN-backed court for alleged atrocities, including genocide. Now, those were committed during the Darfur conflict. Yeah, some of your views about this. It's Kulani Kholele says, chances are Omar al-Bashir is long gone by now. The rest is just history. Mteteleli says, it seems like some criminals have more power. Omar al-Bashir, the case for trying Bush, Cheney, and more for war crimes. Yes, that's the question. What about Benjamin Netanyahu? What about the attacks on women and children in Gaza during the latest conflict? The attacks on we can go on. You can talk about the attacks on schools and hospitals and health workers in conflict zones. ICC said nothing. If Omar al-Bashir can't be charged by the ICC, then who must do it? When and where will he answer for killing black people, if not at The Hague, says Mulugisi. Austin Khere says, our leaders are engaging on matters of importance in the AU summit. The ICC dilutes the occasion by issuing a warrant of arrest on Omar al-Bashir. That is a very sober view, Austin. I think you are spot on there. The ICC, actually, they haven't been investigating this matter. They've closed the matter and left it pending themselves. Now, on this occasion, to issue a warrant of arrest on the weekend, it's just a little bit too much, and it smacks of an organization that must be a little bit out of its depth at the moment. The AU says, not interested. Tweet of the day now. This one comes from Dr. Richard Null, saying, black and white freeborns should be allowed to reject the negative legacies handed down from generations, past generations, and work together. Hashtag ANC, hashtag AU Summit. Yes, yes, Dr. Richard, that is the point. There's no point in us. There's no point in us being stuck in the past or not working together. We have to. We are South Africa. Let's take a look at what's happening on our Newsroom Facebook page today. Now, an American tourist has been admitted to a hospital here in Knysna, here in South Africa, after she was allegedly raped along the coast in the Tsitsikamma National Park in the Eastern Cape, allegedly by two illegal fishermen. The two men, both aged 26 years old, were arrested last night and are expected to appear in court on Wednesday. Then, Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe urged the importance of economically empowering women during his opening speech at the AU Summit. This year's theme is the Year of Women Empowerment and Development towards Africa's Agenda 2063. And China will pledge a multi-billion-dollar investment in Europe's new infrastructure fund at a summit on June 29 in Brussels. For more news, updates, follow us on this Facebook page. Twitter, you can just in the bar, you just put in SABC Newsroom. The page will pop up, like it, and we'll send you all the latest all the time. Now, Hollywood actress and UN envoy on refugee issues, Angelina Jolie-Pitt, created a buzz in the public sphere here in South Africa when she spoke at a panel discussion ahead of the start of this weekend's AU Summit. It was held, of course, at the Sandton Convention Centre here in Johannesburg. She highlighted the fact that sexual crimes against women are more frequently being used as a weapon for militant groups all over the world, and often these acts happen without punishment. We've seen this play out. Boko Haram in Nigeria, young women and children being kidnapped and held hostage at length. There's that picture from the Africa Summit. Time for us to take a break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
We live in a digital era, and the number of Africans with mobile phones is rapidly increasing.
Twitter use is predominantly being done on smartphones. This is a very African phenomenon.
Here, there are constantly new innovative ways to make the internet more affordable. With that, we're seeing protests against governments proposing methods to limit access. On Network, we give you information about all of this. We also have new computers, games, and robots.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
Information-hungry viewers stay with SABC News, as issues on the West are different from issues on the East or here in Johannesburg. So it is not surprising that people who follow the news know that there are two things for sure: that anything can happen, and SABC News will tell you when it does. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. The African Union has come out guns blazing after the Southern African Litigation Centre has taken the issue of the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir to court. Zimbabwe, as the chair country of the AU, says al-Bashir had a right to attend the summit. Today, judgment is expected in an urgent application for his arrest. Al-Bashir is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. As the African Union Heads of State Summit draws to a close today, topics of women empowerment, the war on terror, xenophobia, migration, and finding alternative sources to fund the AU have dominated discussions. Speaking at the summit, AU chairperson and Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe also lashed out at presidents who find excuses to stay on in power beyond the constitutionally mandated 2 terms. And South Korea's health ministry has reported 5 new cases of Middle East respiratory syndrome. This takes the total to 150 cases in the outbreak. That is the largest outside Saudi Arabia. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Thank you very much, Janine. Now, when the lights went out at home because her mother wasn't able to pay the bills, Judy would move to the pavement to finish her homework under a streetlight. Today, Judy is a graduate of Columbia University and a Mandela Rhodes Scholar. This heartfelt story inspired the start of Streetlight Schools, a low-cost primary school education system that is helping many children like Judy to have the right to education. Now, joining us today is Streetlight Schools CEO and founder Melanie Smuts. Good morning, Melanie.
Good morning, Evan.
Interesting story. I love this story. I think it's such a South African story, and such a story of triumph over adversity. Tell us the story about Judy and how it came about to you then having the light bulb moment.
Well, when I was a law student in Cape Town, I started working in schools in Khayelitsha, and I think there I realized that almost every child is a child like Judy, and it doesn't matter which school you came from or where you were born. South African children are just so full of innate potential, They're so brilliant and they're capable of so much. And if we just had a system that allowed them the opportunity to actually go forth and use that talent, then we would be able to achieve so much as a country. And it all really does start with your educational system. And that's why I wanted to start Streetlight Schools, so that we could unlock the potential and the talent of more children like Judy in communities where they're not having that chance at the moment.
Tell me about the model. How does the model fit together? How do you teach in this space?
So I think one of the problems with the way that we do education now is, if you remember your school days, a lot of it was an experience of sitting in a classroom with a teacher in front of you, writing something on a blackboard and you remembering whatever it was.
And the fear of casual violence also permeating the air. Yeah, that was kind of my experience.
Definitely in Jeppystown, that is something which we still work on. Yeah. But I think what a lot of us experienced in school is that's not a very interesting way to learn. And the way that we learn as people is through experiences and through other people. And that's what our model tries to do. So we have 4 rotations: collaborative learning, which is where students do peer-to-peer learning. They help each other, they ask questions, they engage with each other. Project-enabled learning, so how do we make real-world projects that help students engage with the way in which they can understand and see and perceive things. Technology, how do we use great programs like Khan Academy to have children work on their own on the problems that they want to challenge themselves on. And then instruction, how do we bring great teachers in to make sure that all of that learning is solidified. And so your given day is so much more exciting and social and challenging than just sitting in front of a blackboard trying to concentrate on whatever the teacher is writing down.
Now tell me about your team. I understand you've got members from all over the world. How has your business grown to gain this kind of international traction a little bit?
I think in part it's because I genuinely believe what we are doing in Jeppystown is some of the most important and interesting work in education happening in the country at the moment. And I think people respond to that and they believe in that. I think the second thing is that sometimes in South Africa we don't back entrepreneurial spirit. Yeah. And we want to get in once an idea has already proven itself. So I've been tremendously humbled by how willing people from across the world have been to commit to an idea, even when it was just, a tiny room or a small idea or a thing without a name, to just come on board and say, hey, this is how we can get this forward and this is how we can move it to make that dream a reality.
Now, the big push, of course, in South Africa is education. It's one of the government's priorities going forward, 2030, 2063. We can throw all the numbers up. Yeah. How do you... one of the key things is getting parents involved in the education of our children here in South Africa, because that's one of the challenges we face in our education model. How do you get parents to interact with this system?
I think we've been very lucky because we started in partnership with an affordable housing provider in the inner city called Biala. And because we work with this affordable housing provider, I have been into the living room of every one of my early students. And so once you're just willing to commit to the fact that schools are part of a community and education is part of families, then parents respond to that. And I think the second thing that parents respond to is when they see the change and when they see the growth in their children, they can get a sense of how the education for their children is something that they can believe in, unlike perhaps some of the education that they experience themselves.
Who can go there? Who can come through the gate? Is it anybody?
I would love to say anybody. At the moment, it's anybody who lives in Jeppystown. Obviously, we are not catering to the well-heeled of the community. We charge school fees equivalent to what schools in the area will charge. And we are trying to get some scholarships on board as well. But basically, it's for the children of Jeppystown.
How are you going to take this show around the country? How are you going to make this an African solution in a way in the next 20 years? Are you going to start with an education centre that launches in January?
That's right.
Is that the next step?
So we launched actually the education centre this January. It's been running for 6 months. It's been an incredible process. We started in an abandoned factory space and built a facility for 100 children. And then the first primary school will launch January 2016 in Jeffreystown. And who knows from there? Hopefully more schools, and then if your prediction turns right,
take over the world. Now, people want to get involved. It's a wonderful concept. It's a wonderful project. How can people get involved?
Yeah, we really need people's support. It's still very early days for us. So I think start by going to the website, www.streetlightschools.org. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and then you can also email us from the website, and we'll get back to you.
Streetlight Schools, that was the name that you decided on because Judy was working under Streetlight.
Yeah.
Do you still make the children work under Streetlights?
I've never made a child work under a street light, but maybe I'll try it just to remind them.
Okay, you must. Adversity builds character.
Yes.
They tell me.
Yes.
So the tougher your upbringing, the more chance there is of you being a rip-roaring success as an adult. Melanie, thank you. I think it's a fantastic concept that you've got going, and I agree with you. Education is the solution to all Africa's problem in the next 100 years. Thank you.
Agreed. Thanks so much, Evan.
Now, let's take a look at how you view this. What are you talking about on social media? Of course, lots to be had. A couple of comments on top story. Marceline says, well, we're still talking about the Tbilisi Zoo. Marceline says, it's one of many reasons why zoos must be abolished. My heart is with all the animals that were injured or dead. Animal liberation she's fighting for, Marceline. Yeah, you got a point there, my dear. Tbilisi Food Zoo, thoughts and prayers for the defenseless animals that perished. Sad face. And there you see a horrific picture of it looks like a white tiger that died during that tragedy at the zoo. Ms. Valentine says, to think that the tiger I saw and took pictures of is now dead because of the flood. Hope for Tbilisi. Now, there you have another picture coming. That is a rhino having some leaves off a tree in the main road. Now, I'm sure that's not something you see every day. I think that's a marvelous picture. That's from M. Stormborn, horrible tragedy in Tbilisi. Let's just roll some of the pictures again before we go out, Johan, and have a look at some of the pictures I thought were just amazing about the Georgia flood. Of course, we're talking about escaped animals. There you have a bear sitting on top of an air conditioner in the main street. I hope not the high street. Hippo is eating nice greens there under a bridge, mind you. That pig was not in the zoo, man. That pig was not in the zoo. And there you have a picture. I think, is there a bear or something coming past? Just Monday morning traffic. There's a bear. What is that? Oh, it's a dead animal floating down the river. Very, very... Is that a crocodile? Okay, well, there's a crocodile. We wouldn't see that every day now, would you? Crocodile here on the M1 in Johannesburg. Us pulling a hippo down Empire Drive here to outside of the SABC. I think that's a tragic but very, very interesting story. And I think the pictures coming out of that story is kind of once in a lifetime, seeing a hippo in the middle of the high street there. In the High Court here in Pretoria, well, it's expected to hand down judgment this morning on the urgent application for the arrest of Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. The South African Litigation Centre has applied to the court to force the government to issue an urgent warrant. Now, al-Bashir, who is in the country, or was in the country, we don't know, for the AU summit, is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity, allegedly committed during the conflict in Darfur. The court has ordered him to remain in the country. Some say he's left.
Pretoria, in a diplomatic wrangle. As signatory to the Rome Accord, it's duty-bound to arrest al-Bashir. But it invited Sudan's president to the AU Heads of State Summit. Al-Bashir is wanted for war crimes in Sudan's Darfur. These alleged crimes took place in 2003. The ICC issued an arrest warrant in 2009. Since then, al-Bashir's international travel has been severely restricted. This is the Sudanese president's first visit to South Africa since the 2009 edict. Pretoria had not anticipated a possible court challenge.
The South African representative went to make representations to the ICC it resulted in an urgent judgment being issued in which the ICC confirms that President Bashir does not enjoy head of state immunity, and that according to the ICC he enjoys no immunity by virtue of being here.
But the first hurdle they have to jump, a cabinet decision giving blanket immunity to heads of state for the AU summit. The state has asked for time to prepare their legal argument, but they insist Bashir will not leave the country until the matter is resolved.
President al-Bashir has come solely for that reason, that is to attend that summit. So we do not anticipate any situation where then he is likely to leave before the end of the summit.
The judge says all reasonable steps should be taken to ensure Bashir does not leave.
The respondents are directed to take all necessary steps to prevent him from doing so. 2. The 8th respondent, the Director of Home Affairs, is ordered 2.1 to effect service of this order on the officials in charge of each and every point of entry.
The AU, meanwhile, is in al-Bashir's corner. The AU and the IEC have butted heads before, mainly on the arrest of Kenya's Uhuru Kenyatta. Africa wants to try its own leaders and doesn't believe the ICC is the vehicle to do that. Nozindombi Mia, SABC News, North Gauteng Court in Pretoria.
What are your views? At SABC Newsroom is where you can send us your views on this very emotive subject. Some people are saying, what about war crimes in Iraq, in Gaza in the last year? How does it all add up? The ICC has been very quiet on those types of war crimes, but very vocal on what's been happening on the African continent. It is indeed very concerning. We want your views at SABC Newsroom on Twitter to tell us what is happening. Johan, before we go, is there anything else that I need to remember? Of course, it's Youth Day tomorrow. Let's have a look at how we're preparing for Youth Day. The most iconic one of all, of course, there you have that picture. That is what we are celebrating Youth Day for tomorrow. Student protest, student uprising that led to all of us being free today. 1976 remembered. It will be 39 years tomorrow that these pictures have been beamed around the world and set the wheels in motion for us to be free today. Now, Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Don't forget, we also stream live on YouTube at that time, with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. We'll be live here with Youth Day tomorrow, right in the studio, bringing you a whole range of scenarios around what I think is a very important holiday in South Africa. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.
Catch all these and more every day on Sports Live at 8:30 p.m. on the SABC News channel.
One of the things that I want people to do when they come to the exhibit is to see what an incredible work the Migration Series is.
Fami's work has also been featured at London and New York Fashion Week and in collaborations with leading international designers. Tunisia is listed as one of the top 20 destinations for 2015 by the National Geographic Traveller.
There are lots and lots of children who are going to be learning Xhosa as a second language, and Oxford University Press is about supporting language.
Join Musam Khalipi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT.
Information-hungry viewers stay with SABC News, as issues on the West are different from issues on the East or here in Johannesburg. So it is not surprising that people who follow the news know that there are two things for sure: that anything can happen, and SABC News will tell you when it does. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.